The Entrepreneur's Library, episode 143.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur's Library, the only book-centric podcast that reviews all the top-selling business books and shares authors' perspective firsthand. This is your resource to finding the next great book that will enable you to grow personally and professionally. Welcome your host, Wade Danielson.
Welcome back to the EL. Today we have Jacob Engel, author of The Prosperous Leader, How Smart People Achieve Success. Welcome, Jacob, and thank you for joining us on the Entrepreneur's Library.
Thanks, Wade. Pleasure to be here.
Will you take just a moment before we take a deep dive into your book and take a little time to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you personally?
Okay. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and I still live in New York. My father, who was a Holocaust survivor, came to this country, no family, no money, no language, and was lucky enough to find a job in the Lower East Side of New York in a little spice shop. And the fellow said, Mr. Engel, you're too smart to work for me. Why don't you go to Brooklyn, which was then considered far away? And why don't you open up your own spice shop? So my dad did that, started his own little spice business. That was in 1955. He grew the business, and I joined the business in 1975. We were doing about $10 million in sales, which was very significant at that time. By the time he passed away, unfortunately young, but he passed away in 1995, we were doing over $100 million, and eventually the business grew to close to $200 million. And I was the chief operating officer. I'd done many different things in the business. I would travel the world over for spices. I set up our first computer business, first our computer network. I was the CFO and then eventually became the COO. And I realized that I was really in the people business. We had 300 people, close to 300 people working for us. We had started off a few other businesses, and I realized I was really in the people business. And that intrigued me. How do we motivate people? How do we inspire people? How to hire the right people? How to hold them accountable? And I really started to read up on everything that I could, on leadership, on management, on entrepreneurship. And I was fascinated by it. And I also attended every course that I could. And I really got hooked up into a whole bunch of different things. But those things really helped us grow the business. Entrepreneurs have great advantages, but it also comes with disadvantages. And I figured out how to build on our strengths and how to mitigate our weaknesses. And that's really how I got into understanding everything about starting a business, running a business, and building a business. When my father passed away, I sort of decided to look for other things. And eventually I exited the business in 2005. Got involved in a lot of real estate deals, which were doing very well at the time. And then in the crash of 2008, people came to me and said, I lost my job, lost my money, lost my fortune. How do we reinvent ourselves? So we got together in the communities and we created a whole system of helping people reinvent themselves. And what I realized was that people were missing a lot of the skill sets in order to achieve success and reinvent themselves. So I started my own training business, my own training and seminar business. But then I realized that people were listening to it, but not really absorbing it. Or if they absorbed it, after a while, they lost a lot of the message. So I started coaching them one-on-one. And I got myself certified in all kinds of different coaching methodologies. And now, basically, I spend half of my day coaching and half of my day sitting in companies, consulting and building businesses and helping them build and overcome the challenges that I overcame.
So Jacob, thank you for sharing that. And now that we have the preface a little bit, let's jump into the book itself, The Prosperous Leader, which was just made available on Kindle in December, and then will be made available for purchase in February for the actual the hardcover. Correct. And we're going to move quickly, but the whole point of this conversation is really to cover the top questions that our listener / future reader would like to get answered before diving into your book. And the first one is, what was the inspiration behind writing The Prosperous Leader?
Right. That's a very good question. I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd be a writer or a speaker. I loved running businesses. But when I got involved with the community, some people asked me to start to write, and I wrote in a weekly newspaper all my different concepts, and it morphed into articles, and those articles eventually became chapters in a book. And I was really motivated and inspired by my mentor, a fellow named Roy Camerano, who is probably one of the greatest, in my opinion, one of the greatest people that studied and understand entrepreneurs. He lives out in San Diego. And he's trained me, and I've worked with him a lot over many years. He wrote a great book himself. And he told me, Jacob, you should write a book. And I said, Roy, why should I write a book? He says, you should write a book. Share your experiences. People get motivated. Entrepreneurs want to be motivated. They're always looking for motivation, inspiration, and good tips. You got them all. Sit down and write the book. So I spent about 2 years writing and rewriting, and eventually finding an editor, which is a hard job in its own, and a business editor, and then finding a publisher, which is a huge job. And that's how the book came about.
So what would you say makes your book different from others regarding the same or similar topic?
That's a very, very good question, Wade. And I would say that what I bring to the table are a few different things. Number one, I've ran a business myself. I've been involved in growth. I started within the family business. I started 2 of my own businesses. One failed miserably. I know what failure is all about. One succeeded exceptionally well. Taking a business from 10 million to 200 million was an exhilarating ride, but it really teaches you a lot about building and growing businesses, thinking big and executing. So I've got the practical experience. I see a lot of people in the field who just don't have the practical experience and can't really understand the entrepreneur, the small business owner. The other thing is, many times you ask a successful business owner, I don't know if, Wade, if you interview only authors, but if you've ever interviewed a business person and you ask them, so tell me, what's the secret of your success? It's very hard for them to share anything above, well, maybe 1 or 2 things. It's difficult, and I found it even difficult myself to really put it down in a step-by-step format so a person could walk through it and really build on things. And it took me a lot of work to figure that out. The other thing is that whatever I write in my book are practical, useful, step-by-step, doable. I've done them. Many people, all the people I train and I share this with have done them. And it's all within reach. It's not something that is above and beyond, especially, and I'm assuming there are a lot of entrepreneurs that maybe didn't go to college. I didn't go to college. So we need to learn this through books and reading, because this is not taught in school, and I don't think it's even taught in college.
How would you suggest the reader engage with your book? Can they jump in and out, cherry-picking information as needed, or did you really design it to be read from front to back?
So the truth is that nobody reads from front to back. At least not anybody that I know, and neither do I. So a lot of people told me, they pick on different chapters. Every chapter stands on its own. However, the contents of the book really helps you build from step to step. So if you do go from page to page and chapter to chapter, it is definitely beneficial. But you can jump in. Every chapter is really, I'll tell you what it is, Wade. Every chapter is a mini book on its own.
So Jacob, now that we know a little bit of the background, the purpose behind the book, this is my favorite part. And this is where I want to just hand it over the mic and allow you to take the next 5 minutes and take a deep dive into the content, really to let that future reader know what they can expect from your book. Will you do that for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah. So one of the greatest challenges that I see with entrepreneurs and business owners, and many that have come to talk to me and that I coach, is that they seem to be after a while, they just go around and around in circles, meaning they start a business, they have a good concept, they might have some funding, they build on it, and then all of a sudden things start to fall apart and they're back to square one. And they reinvent themselves and they go again and again and again and again. And the famous definition of Albert Einstein, what is the definition of insanity, is doing the same things over and over again and expecting different results. So the idea is really that many entrepreneurs have not figured out what is it that makes them successful or what makes them prosperous. Now, the reason why I use the word prosperous is because too many people chase that almighty dollar. They want to become billionaires yesterday, and they take shortcuts. And you know what happens when you take shortcuts? You end up on the wrong side of the fence, meaning really the wrong side of the fence. You need to build sustainability. You need to build a strong foundation. And what I really write about in the beginning of the book is the foundations that a person needs in order to build a successful enterprise or an organization. You got to build deep. You got to build strong foundations. You build good foundations, you can build up. You build lousy foundations, you do quick and dirty. You don't spend time really figuring out who are the people I need on board, what are the policies I need, what are the financials. And if you don't figure it out up front and you try and catch up later, too many times it doesn't work out and the whole effort just falls apart. So take the time, really plan it well. And as I go through my book, I start off really with the concept that you've got to know yourself, know thyself, understand your strengths, your abilities, understand what you're good at, what are the things that you bring to the table, and what are the things that you really need other people to help you do. I'm a Myers-Briggs types evaluator. I conceptually give you the ideas of Myers-Briggs and what are the testings that they do for people so you know your own strengths and abilities, and then what do you know or what to know and when hiring other people. I see so many hiring mistakes. One of the greatest seminars I do is how to hire and so that you don't have to fire. Too many people make huge hiring mistakes. They hire friends, never hire anybody that you can't fire, by the way, but they don't have a concept, and they use their own gut feelings about it, and that's not a very good way how to hire good people. You really have to understand your own abilities, your own strengths, your own weaknesses, and what are you hiring for. So I clarify that with every entrepreneur, every business owner, help them understand themselves. And once they understand themselves, what is it that you're going to be hiring in order to build up your business? That's sort of the first chapter. Second chapter that I go into is a very interesting, it's an very old argument, nature versus nurture. I'm sure you're familiar with that, or people should be familiar. And the idea is really, are we our nature, or do we learn things, do we acquire things as we go through life? What I argue here is really that there's a third component, and that's called choice. Stephen Covey was a very big fan of choice, which is that, yes, we do have our own nature, which is what I cover in chapter 1, which can make up 50% of the person. But then we've also got the opportunity to choose. The old saying is you can't control how people act. You can only control how you react. So Covey and his 7 habits, and I'm also a certified 7 habits facilitator, goes through the whole process of private victory, public victory. And in the second chapter, I try and really define the different choices that a person can make. And one of the big things Covey brings in his book is Viktor Frankl, who was very well known for his book, Man's Search for Meaning. It's a must-read. And he talks a lot about how a person has the ability in their mind to create their purposes, their mission, their vision. Another thing I bring here in the book is that great quote by Mary Kay Ash, that there are 3 types of people: those that make things happen, those that watch things happen, and those that ask what happened. And if you want to be an entrepreneur, you want to be a successful business owner, you got to make things happen. You got to be proactive, and that is habit 1 of the Covey, is be proactive. In the third chapter, I move over to effective communications. My mentor, Roy Camerano, told me something in the beginning of our training, that the most successful organizations are those where there's effective communications. And effectively communicating is not simple. One of the things I walk through are that there are three types of communicators. There's passive or passive aggressive. There's aggressive and assertive. And each one has its own issues. Really, what you really want to achieve is assertive and effective communications. I quote an unknown author that said, mean what you say and say what you mean, but don't say it mean. You like that, Wade, right?
I do like that one.
Right. So in order to achieve trust, in order to achieve a communicative a team, even if it's one person or two people, or even if you're communicating with your outside vendors or your clients, really know how to effectively communicate. And that is probably one of the most important things that I see. Entrepreneurs fail, small business owners fail, especially business owners. They fail to effectively communicate with their employees, and then they blame their employees. Oh, they're not doing this, they're not following through, and they don't realize that they are as as much of a problem as the employees themselves. And in chapter 4, I talk about emotional intelligence. It's a big word today, and effectively, what that means is you're really hiring your people. Or when you hire people, there are two parts to the hire. There are the technical skills. Let's say if you're in an IT business and the person needs to know, the technicalities of IT. But then there's the other part, the soft skills, the attitude, the teamwork, the emotional intelligence. And as a business owner, you really have to know how that works and how to make it work. Another thing is, this is a quote that I created. There was a famous doctor who coined one of the biggest challenges that people have is what he calls ANTS, automatic negative thinking. We're predictors of demise. This will never work out. That person will never buy from me. This, that, and we according to research, there are 50 to 60,000 thoughts a person has in a day. So when I talk about this, I say, imagine walking around thousands of times a day banging yourself in the head. I'm no good. I'm a failure. Nobody will ever buy from me. And we predict our demise. So the quote that I created was squash the ants, squash that automatic negative thinking. It does not mean that you've got to be this supersized optimist and not look at any of the challenges, but it means really not prophesizing that you'll never achieve anything, because if you do, you will not achieve anything. You're going to create your own prophecy. So I write a lot about the emotional and intelligence and how they go together. It's a very important chapter. Emotional intelligence today is extremely important in being a great leader. I also bring in some stuff. There's a great author. He's a great psychologist. His name is Martin Seligman. He runs the positive psychology in University of Penn. I'm a certified positive psychology coach, and I've studied under some of his students. And he's developed some great stuff, which comes out of CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy, Dr. Aaron Beck, on really how to understand our negative thinking and how to counter it. It's called the ABCD. He's got a few great books. I'm a great fan of his books, and I like in chapter 4, I summarize one or two of his books. It's worthwhile to really read his books itself. In part 2, which is chapter 5, I talk about the balancing act. And Wade, you're probably a great example of prosperous leaders that work at home. And I quote Harold Kirshner, who said, no one ever said on their deathbed, I wish I'd spend more time in the office. And how do you create that balance? It's not simple. I put together a whole chapter on how to actually create that balance. Part of it comes from Covey's Habit 7, which is sharpen the saw. Great story. And let's leave it at that creating balance between family and or our personal life and our work life is hugely important. In chapter 6, I talk about time management. Time management is a challenge for almost everybody, including myself. And I've studied many methods. I'm a very big fan, which I've said before, of Covey's method, the quadrants. By the way, if I didn't say this before, 7 Habits is the number one book that everybody should have read many, many times over. I've quote him consistently in my book, and time management is a great tool for effectively managing your time, yourself, and others. I talk a lot about that in chapter 6. Chapter 7, I picked up something cute, which is smartphones in the workplace. Are they really smart? And I've got a picture in the book of 4 people standing at a bus stop, everybody holding their smartphone in their own world. Smartphones sometimes make us dumb. They definitely make us fat. I know it made me fat. We need to be able to have good habits, especially when we're talking to people, we're in front of them. It's very annoying, and I'm sure everybody knows that it's annoying and they get annoyed, but we do it. And I think it's just something that I wanted to bring out in the book and make sure that business owners and business leaders are aware of it. Chapter 8, I speak about a very interesting subject, which is known today as ADD, ADHD. Many business owners have it. Some of them realize it. Some of them don't realize it. And I help coach business owners and managers through the issues of ADD. I recently was at a conference and somebody asked me if I can give them 2 words. What would I say to a business owner that has ADD? And I would say a highly organized personal assistant. People try and save sometimes money by not hiring an assistant. That's a huge mistake. People with ADD and ADHD have been hugely successful, and I list a whole bunch of them that have been hugely successful. You can build on that strength, and you can mitigate the weakness. In part 3, I speak about a purpose, a mission in life. Viktor Frankl said, we detect rather than invent our mission in life. I saw a cute, very nice, cute quote, habit number 9. As you know, Stephen Covey wrote 7, then 8. And then somebody said, habit number 9 is leave this world a better place than it was when you got there. And he writes on the bottom, mission accomplished, Stephen Covey, 1932 to 2012. Purpose and mission is very powerful. I really believe people need to have their own personal mission statement, team mission statement, their own. So I go through the whole mission statement, how to do it, how to write it, how to really figure out what is your purpose and mission and passion in life. In chapter 10, I talk a lot about goals, creating goals, and using the SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time in our goal planning. I just cross out attainable and say it's got to be ambitious. I like the word strategic planning. I'm a big fan of strategic planning, and I include that in that chapter. In chapter 11, I speak about critical thinking. We don't really think too much. Most people don't think too much, and I've looked at many different types of critical thinking. The one I liked very, very much was written by Edward de Bono, and it's called The 6 Hats of Critical Thinking. Very interesting concept, easy to use. I use it a lot in my business meetings with clients. I sort of summarize it in chapter 11. It's another must-read. Chapter 12, I quote Edward Deming, who said, inspect what you expect, and I talk about delegation and teamwork, the keys to leadership. This is probably the biggest challenge for business owners. Delegating properly. Some people are very hands-on. Some people are very hands-off. Both of them don't work. And the key is really to be able to know how to delegate and create teamwork properly. And that is something that I help companies do on a consistent basis. If they figure it out, life is so much easier. If they don't, life is miserable for them. And in the same token, in chapter 13, I speak about dysfunctional leaderships. Michael Gerber, who wrote an introduction to my book, says, work more on your business than in your business. Business owners need to work more on their business than in their business. So I really walk through that whole process. And in chapter 14, I talk about, how to be the right type of boss. In chapter 15, I speak about business coaches, why every business owner needs a coach and why they need one and what type of coaches. In chapter 16, I speak about the emotional bank account. That's something that Covey writes about, how to build trust with your people, how to make deposits into your emotional bank account. Very, very great concept. Again, in chapter 17, I speak about what's called empathetic listening, empathic listening. That is a Covey concept as well. I actually quote my father, who used to say that if you only talk, then you are just repeating what you know. If you listen, you will learn some new things. Dale Carnegie was a big fan of that. Covey really went into it. Active listening, empathic listening. The listening skill is a huge skill. Huge, huge skill. You want to be successful. You want to create trust. One of the biggest skills that I've learned and use it very effectively is the listening skill. On chapter 18, I speak about sales. And the reason is that most of my clients, for some reason or another, take sales for granted. They don't think really how they're going to go out there and sell. Some of them really don't even know how to price their product. So I quote again my dad, who said, everyone can sell $1 for 99 cents. Meaning, to be profitable is the trick. Even though Jeff Bezos, doesn't. But overall, just plain mortals like me and you and everybody else, we need to make money in order for a business to be successful. And what's the secret to selling success? I've got a whole chapter on that. Highly recommended. Next chapter I speak about is negotiation skills. Know what you want and how to get it. I quote somebody who said that know what you stand for and what you won't stand for. It's also part of the win-win negotiation that is very prevalent today, but really know how to do it. At the end of the book, I talk about savvy leaders that have really done the right thing and done extremely well. I quote a very personal friend of mine, Paul Silverberg, who said the best deal with bad people will always be a bad deal, and how to know when to say no. Chapter 21, I speak about happiness and well-being. I'm a happiness coach. Too many people go through their business lives stressed out, worried to death, don't appreciate what they have, and the attitude of gratitude. So I talk a lot about that at the end of the book.
So Jacob, with those, and I want to make sure that we have enough time for this last question, because we've already covered, and I appreciate doing it. You covered several different quotes so far and some fantastic book recommendations. I've read both Covey's and Viktor Frankl's book, and Victor's is, I don't know how you don't read that book and that impact you for life. But I do want to make sure that we have enough time for this question, because your book covers a massive amount of really important information. And I think that's what makes this next question so difficult, in that we're asking that if the reader could only take away, one concept, principle, or action out of your entire book, out of this entire discussion that we just had, what would you want that to be?
Wow, that is such a difficult question, Wade, because as you can see, I cover so many subjects. And what I really try to do is simplify, but take out the essence of each author so that there's a powerful lesson here. What I'd like to be able to, the reader to go away with is that, if you did not make it through college or through some Ivy League school and you didn't get those high grades, don't despair. There are a lot of books out there. Now, most of my clients ask me, so which books should I read? And I say, well, 25 books. And they say, 25 books? I said, okay, you know what? Read my one book. I summarized 25 books in my book. And I think these are 25 very important concepts. Each one stands on its own. You can pick and choose, but you will gain from each chapter.
And like you said, each concept is basically written into its own little mini book from what you were saying, right? Each individual little chapter.
Right. Correct.
Okay, that's excellent. So Jacob, first of all, I want to say thank you for coming on and sharing. Again, people love quotes, and you shared several different quotes and a couple of different books. So I really appreciate that. I think as a book-centric podcast, everyone's kind of waiting for what's the book recommendation. But I do want to ask this before we depart. Can you recommend the best way for our listeners to not only get more information on you, but also your book, The Prosperous Leader?
Sure. Now, before you go, I got to quote you the last chapter of my book, because I think everybody knows the first part of the quote, but somebody wrote a huge addition to it. And let me just share it with you, and then I'll go to the next question, if I may. Wade?
Yeah,
yes?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So I'm sure you're familiar with this one. Give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach him how to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime.
Yes.
But teach a man how to learn, and you feed him for a lifetime, and he doesn't have to eat fish every day.
And who was that, you, or who added that on?
I found it somewhere. A fellow by the name of Tim Galloway. I'm not sure who he was. The first part of it was written by the famous Chinese philosopher, I think Sun Tzu or Lao Tzu. I'm not sure. But this is the add-on was a fellow by the name of Tim Galloway. I'm not even sure who he is. But it is so fantastic. All right. So I do have a website, actually, which it's just going through a little bit of a morphous. So, but the website is theprosperousleader.com. The Prosperous is spelled Prosperous, leader.com. There are, quite a lot of information. I'm an active blogger on management, leadership, and everything else in between. The book can be found on Amazon. If somebody does want to contact me, my email is jme, my initials, at theprosperousleader.com.
Jacob, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your book with us.
I appreciate it, Wade, and you're doing a great job, and I really want to commend you for it. It's a great service, and I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks again for listening in today. If you'd like more information on Jacob or his book, The Prosperous Leader, just check out the show notes at the elpodcast.com. And as always, if you'd like an opportunity to win this book, become a VIP at that same spot, the elpodcast.com.
Looking for your next book idea? Head over to the elpodcast.com, where Wade shares his amazing resource, the top 10 business books recommended by over 500 entrepreneurs, with you for free. That's the elpodcast.com. Till the next time, keep it on the EL.